1, 2, 3.
What time is it?
One, two, one, two, one, two, one, two, one, two. You're listening to the Online Time Fame Podcast. I'm your host, JD. This show right here is a good show. It's called Charleston White Insight. America the Delusional. And that goes back to an interview Charleston White did in 2025, September, where he was talking about, he said he wasn't the enemy of America when he made some comments about the individual that was deleted, Charlie Kirk. And Charleston had some comments about him, and he said when they, see, Charleston has risen to a level where there's insider information going on, and then there's the general public information. See, a lot of people watch the general public information, and they think they know what's going on. They watch some, mainstream news, and even if it's independent news, one just has to be intelligent and to have acquired intelligence through study, through wisdom, through exchanges. No one knows everything, and people sometimes on the outside, they speak as though they know insider information and were never in those rooms. There's a lot of speculation. That's why the main thing we say, and we remind everybody, there's 3 levels of existence that we speak on in communication. Small minds, small-mindedness talks about people. Average minds, average-mindedness talks about events. And great minds, great-mindedness talks about ideas and solutions. So it's good, it's necessary to have conversations and critiques of people. And there's people who do that successfully. So that's what they do. They do gossip. They do rumors. They do back and forths. They do conflict, because conflict is a high rate of viewership, because that drives these so-called social media and digital media algorithms. So people, they gravitate toward that. So if you do that and you use certain words, of course, but as we said, Charleston White ain't even a word no more. He's now a catalyst to algorithms, because his circulation has become so widespread that each moment, each era, there's a certain individual who is that individual. Now, why is Charleston White that individual? Because he was able to bring comedy, joking, confrontation, the stuff that people like. But once they looked a little deeper, a little further, what did they find out? They found out that as an interview, maybe October or September of 2025 also, he was talking, and it's hard to pinpoint his interviews because his channels come and go so much. You can't really depend on his channels and network, because they'll be deleted. You won't see it, so you won't be able to reference his information without actually taking it and using it, because it won't be seen unless you have it. But the point is, Charleston White made a statement. He said, I know politics, I know law, I know he knows community activism, and he said he knew history, and he knew comedy, he knew talking. So the point is, a lot of people are one-dimensional. They do something, and once they get an audience doing it, they keep doing it. But by him being perceived as negative and being confrontational, and I guess they would call that sensationalism, like Howard Stern used to do when it used to be called a shock jock, by him going that route and taking that avenue, so-called black folk like that. A lot of people with the working class, the working poor, it's an extreme distraction from the everyday struggle that people go through every day. People like that drama. That's what, the U.S. has groomed its populace to embrace drama. Other countries, they have a tighter rein on what can be said. They control the media. But as long as there's drama and negativity in the U.S., there's no need for extreme control, because the people are distracted and they don't see the big picture. So this show is really about America the Delusional, because people have deluded themselves into thinking stuff is what it ain't. They think situations are something that they are not. People think that they know something that they really don't know. So we'll say it like this. The availability to publish content and look like, it's on television. It looks the same as television. The programming on digital platforms with the technology available at a low cost, it looks like a television program. So people are deluded into thinking, well, I'm just like the individual on ABC, CBS, and NBC. They think it's just like that. But those individuals went to journalism school or they were self-taught. Because I mentioned college a lot, and college don't mean someone is superior to everyone else. Because if you go into the author, the writer, the famous science fiction writer, Ray Bradbury, he never went to college. One of the greatest American writers of all times. You know, he said he read a lot. He went to the library, and he's self-taught. That was possible at one time. It's still possible depending on the field that one studies. But I say college as well because it teaches procedure. It teaches protocol. It teaches how to have standards. It teaches how to have balance. A lot of, there's other things that's intangible that one learns in school. That a lot of people, they just jump online and they are offended when they hear some critiques of how they do something, and they don't have the college credits and they don't qualify to know what one has to go through to earn them credits. You go into a professor's classroom, professor don't even like you. Unless it's a ABC clear-cut mathematical formula, that teacher may say, I don't like your kind, and he can be strict on everything. You may have 1 point missing, or even though it's wrong, he may say, oh, I knew you knew the answer and you just wrote that wrong. But he may say, nope, I ain't giving you nothing. It's dependent on them. So math is a little less room for bias and people to, interject with their own feelings, their own dislike, or whatever the case may be, prejudice or whatever. Whereas when it's literarily connected, when it's writing and interpretation, one can be in trouble. There's still points that have to be made and followed, but this is a procedure that one goes through where they're getting scrutinized to earn these credits. So people in the regular world, they don't get scrutinized by anybody. They just write something and they think what they think, and they never went to now they may go to work and are told at work, you're not functioning, you're not doing your job, and they get an evaluation. They're getting paid for that evaluation. The opposite is college, where college is one is paying to go to school. So one is paying to be critiqued. Or at least with a job, you're being critiqued, but you're being critiqued based on your performance. So it's academic performance, but you're still paying to be critiqued. So it adds a different layer and dimension that a lot of people don't have. They think they got it, but you can see it on certain levels because people don't have to go through the same procedures to get what they got. That's why we call this online time fame. The online fame has equaled and almost in some cases surpassed what traditional fame used to be. So that's why a lot of people, they think they're talented, but they're really not. They're only talented in comparison to recent waves of acceptance that have happened through social media. You got people doing little dances and steps and calling things challenges. That's elementary school talent. If you go, and this is the thing about digital media, it lets us research and go back and see archives. We used to have to really search out. They used to have those Time Life, and they would have a collection of music or a collection of video, and you could order, you could go in magazines and order, still can. You can order DVDs and collections. Like you can go to Amazon, you can go online, you can go to bookstores, and you can order DVD collections of history and TV series. But it's readily accessible a lot of times as well. You can see at least parts of it online. And when you go look at the Jackson 5 right now, because they show it on social media all the time, you go watch the Jackson 5, people don't even know what they're looking at. You see people who are in sync, synchronized with each other, moving on stage, that's singing, dancing incorporated with the steps while moving, and keeping audience participation. Got their eyes on the crowd. They're not just looking at each other and trying to make sure they're right. And they got steps while playing instruments. At their height, when you really see it online and you watch a Jackson 5 concert, they're playing instruments and singing and dancing all simultaneously. So nowadays, people doing some steps and they can sing. At least Michael Jackson and at least a few of the brothers could sing well enough to be a solo artist, obviously. Today, with the advent and the invention of auto-tune, one can be a performer and not even know how to sing. The lyrics ain't going to be tight. Michael Jackson and Jackson 5, they didn't, I watched that It was a documentary about the movie about their whole life. I don't remember what it was called, the Jacksons or something. It would obviously, right? And they show their lives, and it's just something to see from what they went through and how they had to be on the road. So they didn't write the songs. That was Motown wrote the songs until they got 10 years later. But my point is, you see people today, what they're writing, and you compare it to some of the dynasties of music in the past. These lyrics ain't nowhere close to those lyrics. This ain't nothing close to Philadelphia International Music and Gamble and Huff. It ain't nowhere close to Holland Dozier Holland. When you talk, even Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, who was responsible for Janet Jackson. This stuff ain't nowhere near that. Look at it. See, that's what academia will teach. When one knows from an academic perspective how to compare literary documents, you're comparing lyrics and you're comparing poetry. Let's call it poetry because it's song lyrics. So therefore, they have courses that they teach that. So everybody who's critiquing something, they ain't trained in that. They haven't even taken a class. Not to say one is an expert from taking one course in it, but there's people who've majored in comparative literature. And so you got people at home with very little education, which is the difference between the U.S. and a lot of other countries. The people here are more educated, but they step outside themselves thinking they know more than they really know, ain't got no credits, ain't went through those courses, ain't went to these universities, haven't did programs. Because every time Charleston White is breaking something down, what does he always say? He took courses. He worked with the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. That's, I think it is, Arizona State University. He was at some, multiple schools in Texas and university. He always qualifies that. Because it's one thing to attend a college. You can be a college, there's a college graduate, and then there's a college student. One can be a student and be very competent. And they may say, well, I'm so advanced and competent, I don't have to graduate. That happens a lot. That's Bill Gates. He graduated from college, but he didn't complete his PhD because he was in a realm with enough knowledge where he was about to release Microsoft without having to finish college. He had to jump on what he had to the wave at that moment. He had to go and complete that. So when Charleston White is breaking that down, he's talking about that all the time. He's breaking down the knowledge. Of course, he has to talk the jokes. If you ain't talking the jokes, the people don't pay attention. So he had to add that in. He had to give those moments where he said, I'm going to say these jokes. And that's what makes you rise to where you are. But once one gets to where they are, they have to be multi-dimensional. They got to have something else, or they're going to burn out. That 15 minutes of fame is going to be gone. See, so now they're waiting on his fame to be gone, but he's starting to make connections at other levels and in other circles. He's starting to network with people who can now push buttons and pull strings because he's on his way as being an insider, because he has the charisma to do comedy. That's why we did an episode we called it the long range comedy game. The long range comedy is what it is. So he's able to go long range. He can go from this city to that city, do interviews, and it's compelling information. If you want to keep it ignorant, he can keep it ignorant, which most people are. That's where they like to be, the ignorant side. But then if he has to take it higher, when you go into the higher levels of communication and education and politics, as he said, he was knowledgeable about law, community activism, history. When you can do that, that's when you can expand. That's when people can communicate in any room. They can go in this room with these types of people. They can go in there with this type of people, because so-called black folk like to put themselves in one group of ignorance. They don't like to see someone who could think outside the box. They don't gravitate to those people. At this moment in time, the so-called black people are pointed to dumb people. The dumb people are on top, leading and doing all the speaking, where you got a lot of nice, cordial, polite scholars amongst so-called black folk, not the ones who are the puppets who are paid to play the game like they're really scholars, but the unbiased individuals who bring documentation. They're mild. Most of them are mild-mannered. They're not street level. They're mild-mannered. You can overwhelm them with bullying and talking. They don't entertain that. They're straight academians. They're straight academic people. So they don't get no real true viewership. They got their few people that look at them and listen to them, but that's not entertainment. That's information. And so the entertainment people, you got people who do gossip, who got more subscribers on social media platforms, more supporters, more purchasers of their product than people who got sense. And that's the problem. So that's why the result is what it is. That's why people get pulled over and abused lawfully, because the image of the so-called black people is of stupid people. And when you look further, 90% of the people who you see in prominent positions now, they not American descendants of slavery. So when you look at this one and they kind of look brown or they might look light skinned, but when you look into their background, their whole family is from somewhere else. So when they speaking on stuff that they speaking on, they not even really of that group. There's people who are world known. They're prominent national figures in media, and they'll say we, meaning so-called black people. But when you look, they from this island over here. They have a descendancy, a commonality, just like a Chinese have a commonality with a Japanese, but they're very different. But so the people be saying we, and they be talking like they from here, and they've been selected. They ain't the top. They the ones who they lick the boots the best in the back rooms, in the boardrooms of the people who run stuff. That's the next level that things went to after the 1960s. It became bootlickers and sellouts because the real ones was being deleted. Fred Hampton Jr. I'm just talking about, not to say they were completely had reached their pinnacle of wisdom, because this individual was like 21 years old getting killed. So at least with Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, they were a little older, but they still was in that 40 years old range, which ain't old to be on a world stage, speaking or national stage, or someone who knew leadership and knew protocol because they had elders showing them what to do, and they just imagine where they would have been later. But I'm not saying that was the proper approach. I'm not going to critique it as the wrong approach. I'm just saying that's where the times of the world were in the 60s. But since that point, everybody they chose and put in positions was people who weren't a threat. For example, after Jack Johnson, around 1910, when Jack Johnson was famous at 1900, 1910, before he became like the world figure as a heavyweight champion, because he was the Negro champion first. Then he became the world champion overall. After he wasn't the champion no more, there was an effort to find someone who wouldn't act like him. So when Joe Louis rose to prominence, he always was required to say, "I'm not going to be like Jack Johnson." He's on record of showing his demeanor and how he would conduct himself in public. So it's so anyway, that's a whole nother thing. But the point is, we're talking about Charleston White and his multidimensional approach, being able to speak on different topics. And if you ain't got that raw ruckus game of jokes, Dolomite, you gotta have that ignorance. A lot of people play ignorant, and that's where you get the attention from. So if that's what, but that's a sad state to be in, but that's what it is. The streets is the street, and people who come from the street.
The street is the street, always.
They know how to conduct themselves in those situations. They know how to communicate, because you got to come through the street to even get to them universities. People talking about when they go into the penitentiary and they was doing so-called gang stuff. I know people who, when I would meet them, I'd say, "Oh man, you used to hang on the street," because they from some of the roughest areas in the country. You know what they always used to say? "Nah, I was in the house." They come from where they coming from, and they just like how people have to do today. Now people got to go where they going and come inside the house, go inside. Back in a certain time, people could stand on the corner all day long. It wasn't nobody really riding by and shooting people. That was before, but once people started doing shootings and what they called was drive-bys, people couldn't stand outside in the open no more. because people would send people there. But there was a time where that was a cultural experience, being outside. Babies be outside. Grandmothers be on the stoop. So it wasn't a bad thing. The younger dudes, the males, they would be a little further down the street, but they was on the corner too. But what they was there for is they was protecting from outside forces. Hate groups would drive through Negro neighborhoods and commit acts of violence. That's why when these people, they talk like they really part of the soil, they families never went through that in this country, but where are they? Right on top of media, independent media, but they talking and they proclaiming and they benefiting from that legacy of being so-called American descendants of slavery, but they not. That's all political games. And they boost up because people pick and choose what they want based on how they want to feel. And it's political. So when Charleston White rose and said what he said, America, I'm not your problem. Black people are not your problem. Russia and China are your problem. When he said that, that was speaking to a certain group. That's what made him ascend and supersede just being a common Negro. Because the common Negro, you can satisfy him with a small amount of cash. He calls it a lot, but it used to be called Negro rich. And they used to use the other N word when they described it. So you was doing better than everybody in your little circle. And that's every entertainer in this country. That's their little circle. And they're always wealthier than you. And they always going to somewhere that you can't go. But that ain't even the people who, you ever seen Bill Gates dressed in some of the stuff these dudes wear? You would never see it. He rides around in minivans with those button-down Oxford shirts. Now, that's not to say he don't have stuff and he may not be in a certain place where he might present himself a certain way, but it's just it's a certain cultural context. Some people who really got it don't show nothing. You just won't see it. And if they do, like I say, if they do splurge, they got areas that's blocked off where you won't see it. Ain't no cameras. They can do their thing. But that's called, that's a conservative mindset of how someone carries themselves conservatively. They don't flash their material possessions. They don't do it. But the Negro is fascinated by it. They send a couple Negroes, let them get some paper, and they keep the other ones in check by saying, "Dude got $1 billion." I remember back in when Russell Simmons was the head of Def Jam, and he was in it's online. He was doing an interview in GQ magazine, and he said, "Yeah, I want to be like David Geffen." But all of the so-called Negroes was saying, in their minds, I want to be like Russell. Where Russell was looking at someone way ahead of him as a music executive. David Geffen, brothers didn't know who David Geffen was back then. This was before he started, doing certain things. But, before, when he was quiet with it and less known because he hadn't grown to own certain companies, and he was behind the scenes at MCA, they ain't know who that was. That's always a so-called, but it don't matter who's saying they want to be like who. The point is, people can't stand being critiqued. They call it hate as a defense mechanism, or he's hating. The sensitivity levels are too high of so-called black folk. One reason given is because they're emotional, based upon being raised in single-parent households. That's why you used to hear the people saying, your grandmama must have raised you. The trolling and all of that, just feminine characteristics. Either hyper-aggressive characteristics of people who lack reasoning ability, or it's just straight like their mamas raised them. Sometimes, we had those feminine traits we was brought up by women, and some males in the neighborhood, males in the family, they have to be told, hey, check that boy. He acting a little, he ain't right. And him ones has to be taught. A lot of dudes never got taught. Don't let him be big and muscular. You can't tell him nothing after you come around after he's 14 years old. He's ready to wrestle up older people on the ground. Can't tell him nothing. So the first place he's going to end up and get his discipline is the penitentiary. That's why Charleston White used to say some of these dudes need to go to jail, come back with some religion in them. So everybody was laughing, but those who've been to the penitentiary knew it was true. They knew they didn't listen before they went to jail. You think they ain't told? Hey, don't do that. So they can come home and then, as I said, they can't even have a conversation without cursing. So how you going to talk to a bunch of kids where when you get heated, you got to start cursing? You can't even check nobody without cursing. See, so that's why I say these are the danger people. The people who can speak articulately without cursing, dangerous. Because they can check somebody and the person can't say, why are you cursing at me? That's a deflection. But when you can go at them and you can do it articulately and your vocabulary is right and you are able to go in different circles and rooms, that's what Charleston White is doing right now behind the scenes that people don't see. So at a certain point, some of the moves he's doing, we might not agree with it. Oh, why are you meeting with him? Why? It's strategic moves now. Because now they've recognized, oh, this one, he's another one of them. He's one of them ones who's smart, but he can bring himself back down to the people who the ones who spend the paper. The ones who gonna come to the shows, so-called black folk, gonna support you. If they with you on the street and they know you keeping it 100, they gonna spend with you. You're gonna get some of that consumer paper that every other group in the world wants to get. They want that Chinese neighborhood in your restaurant. You know, they want them restaurants and them stores, or what I'm talking about, them grocery stores in your area. You think they make hundreds of thousands off those stores in your neighborhood. The one you couldn't get, the one that your family sold to them because it was getting a little rough. So, it's a big picture. So the point is, when you look at greatness, this is the funny thing about so-called black folk. When you look at greatness, and there's great athletes who never changed teams. They played on a losing team for their whole career. So they never made it to the echelons in the conversations of like Michael Jordan. You know, so in the past, this is how like the older athletes look. That's why they look at LeBron James like that, because he could have been a kind of a losing, or a lot of pressure on him playing for Cleveland. He could have almost stayed in Cleveland his whole career. But it's just like when certain players went to Golden State Warriors, they wasn't beating the Golden State Warriors. So what did they do? They went and got on to the Golden State Warriors. So old time players, you stuck with the team you were with, and you tried, because sometimes the team couldn't invest in them. And I mean, it's hard to say, because sometimes before they had what they call revenue sharing, that meant the wealthiest teams used to have to give some funds to the smaller market team, because the small market team, the stadium might be little, the city might only have 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 people, so they're not going to have the same audience and the same reach that a major city team like the Los Angeles Lakers or like the New York would have. See, they ain't gonna have that Chicago size, that Texas size reach. Because see, when you get them big cities, they also got their own cable channel. They also got, they got programs. They might have a local program on TV, but now this turned to cable. So or the owners themselves just might be wealthier. And they might say, we got the team, but, we can't afford to draft that player. We can't play his salary. We can't overpay the fine you got to pay for going over the salary cap. People don't care about that. It depends on the philosophy of the team, the ownership. But the point is, people, they change when the situations aren't to what they want. They changed up. They didn't say, like, I'm going to stick with where I'm at. George Gervin is one of the greatest basketball players of all time. But by him being with a team that never won championships, he's not measured on the same scale as the handful of great teams. The Boston Celtics, the LA Lakers, the ones with the high levels of championships. And so anybody who didn't play the other teams, there was great players. They didn't win. They could have ran off and got traded. They could have said, I got to get over there to this team with those dudes. They didn't do that back then. So they had more loyalty. They stuck with what they were with. So now we have different comparisons based upon what we see and the limited view and the viewpoint we might have. That was, so part of it was political. But they definitely didn't respect nobody who just ran off and said, I got to change up. They didn't respect that, period. Because that's the whole same thing with people who leave their country. Their country doing bad, they leave their country and come to the USA. They came to the U.S. That's why Charleston White said, we are only friends. People come here for the money. Not because they love the country. They love the country once they get here because it got benefits that their country they just left didn't have. They wasn't included in the inner circles in them countries. You was on the outside. That's why your parents grabbed them 3 suitcases and came here. People from down south say the same thing about people who live in the north, even in the U.S. We didn't run. Well, I mean, that's a whole nother thing. Because I'm like, well, it's a whole country. So you don't got to stay in this neighborhood. And people can say it's a whole world. Well, it ain't a whole world when you got to come through immigration. And you got to agree to certain protocols. That's why people were so happy allowing individuals to just walk through the border without having to do no type of recognition of rules and regulations. They got neighborhoods that you can't even go into their neighborhood. It's fenced off. You can't go past this point. They got private beaches Only people who can come in this beach are the people who live here. They got that in the USA. But yet you can run across a border and be in a country and everybody is like, oh, he should be able to stay. You can't even go to certain people's neighborhood. I know neighborhoods, if you go through there, you're going to immediately see a squad car roll up and say, hey, what's up? You lost? And you got to say, oh, no. I know such and such over such and such, and they're expecting me. And they'll say, oh, all right. And they still going to slowly follow you if you're on foot or a motorcycle or a bike and maybe in a car. They still going to look. And then if that individual had maybe called and said, hey, I got a guy coming up in case y'all see somebody. Or after that first time, they'll know you. Oh, that's dude. He works for such and such. But yet you can run over the whole country. You got two people. This is why I said, when you get Charleston White really coming at you, that's what happened. This dude's trying to check Charleston White online, and he already checked him. He already said, he checkmated them by saying, listen, you only online. That's the only thing you do is wait for the Google AdSense check, this revenue from the commercials that are played on your show through monetization. That's where you get your bread at. You don't do nothing else. You ain't got no products. So all over now, their minds are spinning. They've been asleep for years getting that one level of revenue. And now they want to say, damn, I don't have nothing else to do, because they may not be nothing else. They may not have the ability. See, that's why I say you get into mental capacity, and then you get into versatility. So the people who you see ain't the ones. This show you listening to right now can have 10 people listening, but you saying this ain't the same as the ones that did it, that's doing it. That's because it doesn't matter. The people don't know. Just because the people don't know, and the saying that goes from the street is the best player don't always win. See, so, that's what I said. You could look at George Gervin. He ain't got all them championships, but he's just as good as LeBron James any kind of way. We talking about scoring, maybe defensively, but that maybe he don't feel like playing defense because he know they counting on me to get 38 points a game. David Thompson, he ain't known for them levels of championships. So they ain't going, he ain't going to be recognized like that. So, I mean, that's a whole nother argument, not to go in the sports context tangent, so pardon for that. But just saying everything we see ain't what it is. And that's what made the U.S. what it is for the past 60 years, more like a low-scale place where the opportunist has risen to a high level because of fear that they may have something that was someone who was going to be more defiant. And those types of people, the defiant people, scared people, they call them militants. But when it's a Caucasian, they call them a radical. See, so, so the so-called black militant, but it's the, left, the radical left. It was different, even racially from that level. But the point is, as Charleston White is checking these people, he already got through the door with the ignorance. And that opened the door for us. We can kick a little positivity. We can kick a little academia. We could kick a little, it just got to have that flavor to it because it's that long-range game. See, these other dudes ain't got that long-range game. Whatever they got is plugged into the corporate moves behind. They can call these people who own these platforms from behind the scenes and say, oh, don't block my man for that. They connected. So what happened to the U.S. is the people who run stuff ain't necessarily the dudes who should have positioning. That's what happened to the so-called black folk. Black folk, they up in there blaming Caucasians for all the ills that happened. But they ain't talking about the way they put themselves in positions through the opportunities and being opportunistic, blocking out others so they could look greater. That's what we have. You don't got people who are in position who make 14, 15, 20 people in that position. You ain't gonna have that. You got 1 or 2 or 3 people who like to look like they the greatest in the one. If you really the one, you can make 10 dudes just like that. And I ain't talking about when you talk about hip hop, make another one. Nah, because that's all controlled anyway. And then there were aspects where that did happen. But the point is, when Charleston White hit them with that game and said, wait a minute, y'all just online. That's it. And he went on and started doing actual comedy shows and being on the road and developing a comedy act as a new comedian. That changed the game. And that's what put the stamp down on the streets. Because when they knew he can come somewhere, especially in the South, and the South gonna support. And the South gonna show up, not only because he's being a voice and a comedian, but they also knew that the community activism and working with children, not just passing out no book bags once a year, because you can get free book bags, not just doing no shoe drive, because the shoe drive company, they're gonna distribute shoes, but he can hit them with, this is the reason why y'all ain't got no shoes. You got to change this mechanism and this part of behavior. So he can hit them from that level. So he's making stuff happen in the past. He was doing it already. So all the success that he's getting now is just a byproduct of what he already had done. And that's the difference. These other people are doing a lot of talking and they ain't doing nothing. So fortunately, that's why I say my people, they came with empowermentforthepeople.org, empowermentforthepeople.com, teaching people how to start a business, teaching them how to at least get it started and try to have something going on the side. But to have that mindset, when I get an opening, I know how to be a consultant. I know how to, boost myself because the economy is rough. So I'm already looking at that direction. But the people who doing the talking that you think really know, and they was rapping like 15, 20 years ago, and they still rhyming, they ain't never said nothing of profound magnitude. Because like I said, our people got their idea from who? A community activist, Tupac Amaru Shakur, who was taught through the Black Power movement, through the Black Liberation movement, through the Black Power movement, through the Black Panther Party for self-defense. The first organization who featured free breakfast programs for children. Before you have free breakfast programs sponsored by cities and states and local schools, it was the Panther Party who brought that idea, which became a national movement, meaning the whole U.S. adopted that from the Panthers. So not to say that, the Panthers was perfect, because they was young people and they have ideas, they reading books and they're testing philosophies, but they're bringing them philosophies out on the street. So when you bring what you read out on the street, those in power you may not like it, and that what you read may not translate equally. It may not be 100% correct. It may not be all the way equal, but you out there testing it. But that test might cost. See, when people test radical ideas, different thought in college, that's contained by a campus. So that's how you learn what to do in the real world. You do it on campus, you get in trouble. You say, well, I ain't going to do that no more. So that even though that campus suspension might cost you, you may be suspended for a semester. And in the real life, you would have did that. It might have cost your life. That's how Fred Hampton was. They was experimenting in real life. And I think Charleston White dropped a jewel when he said he drops words. He drops words. We said it in the episode before this. We said it in one of the episodes. Ethnocentric. He dropped that word when he said, white people, you're ethnocentric. That means you think your culture is better than other cultures. That's why you move a certain way. So what he was saying was, y'all coming at me about what I said about this Caucasian, but when I said all this other stuff about these other people, y'all didn't say nothing. Yeah, everybody heard him say that, but it went further and higher to those who have the intelligence and have vocabularies. See, we shun people with a vocabulary. Man, this dude trying to talk white, man. You think he's smart like that. What's wrong with being smart? What's wrong with reading, especially when you sharing it and give it to somebody else? Hey, man, you should read this book right here. You should learn this right here. That was real stuff. But now, when you look at mainstream media, it's a dude who's doing something completely off-key, backwards, wearing a dress or something real weird, and everybody's scared to say something because it's a bully in a dress. It's a bully from prison who's talking about violating dudes, and everybody's looking at it. Something completely backward, left, sideways, crooked. That's what's now embraced, and that's the propaganda that makes the U.S. so great, because they'll put the propaganda, but that don't mean you got to adhere to it. They dropped all the drugs on the street, but we ain't have to use it. You see it. Nah, I ain't touching that. They like, hey, man, I'll give you this for free. You can get down with me. Nah, I ain't doing that. I'm going to go over here to McDonald's. I'm going to get this right here. I'm going to do this. I'm going to just struggle. You'd be struggling so hard in the street when you knew street people. Everybody thought you was getting high. Man, he must be getting high because he don't want none of this. We rolling. How your man don't want to roll with us? He like, nah, because you've been schooled by the older people. And they said, nah, your whole dude, all them dudes right there, they all going to the penitentiary for 30 years. And you was like, what? Nah, they, and you looked at it and you saw how they was rolling, and you was educated by the gangsters. And they'd be like, they going to jail because they ain't even listening to us. And that's what happened. So when people come back home, I just want to teach the youth. The youth already knew. The youth knew. It was people in dire, harsh situations. So I don't want to put them people down like that, because it was people who were struggling. But see, there's a masterful level of someone who can struggle and then say, I'm still not going to do it. That's what a lot of people are made of. But no one can condemn nobody for what they did like that. It's an unfortunate situation. But I'm saying when you come on and be bragging about it like that was some balling, that's some whole nother stuff because people was there. Any year, it could be this year to 3 years from now, you're going to see somebody doing something that you ain't going to do. They're going to have repercussions. They pay from doing it. And then it ain't like they can come back and say, I just want to tell people don't do that. Everybody who looking at you right now know not to do it tomorrow. But if you do it and get the consequences of it, you can't come back and be like higher than thou. I'm teaching y'all something. Everybody knew you was going to the penitentiary. You just was balling. We giving you a pound up in the club. Oh, you doing it? Yeah, you doing it. We give you your props. Whereas now it's haters. You didn't hate, but don't come back like, you was just doing something that you didn't know. I mean, maybe you didn't know better or you learned. And that can be a learning experience. But that ain't nothing to, like, as we say. People who wasn't seeing someone do that disrespected us. Oh, he ain't having no money. Ain't that what black folk always say? He ain't doing it. But they didn't say you don't have more talent than they got. They don't say that you just got an opportunity that others don't get because people keep the opportunity scarce amongst y'all because they used to say, there was a saying that I heard a brother break down. He said it's 99 Negroes allowed in heaven at one time. And he didn't use the word Negro. It was an N word. 99 of them allowed in heaven, meaning we let a small amount of y'all get on. That's how it used to be because it was mainstream TV, mainstream media, and it wasn't that many opportunities, period. Now it's unlimited. There's still some regulations in digital media because digital is becoming more corporate. It ain't as independent as it used to be. In the beginnings of these social media platforms, they had more independence, more leeway in being free speech, but then they changed the rules. You can't say that no more. So the USA, they allowed the bootlicker, the brown noser, to rise to a high level of administrative authority over those with true talent and leadership. See, they ain't making 20 people. Let me give you a hardcore example. When you look at Barry Gordy, the founder of Motown Records, they had a family business. They were Detroit, Michigan. They had other labels. Tamla, Motown wasn't even the first. Gordy, they had other labels before Motown was really like the main label that they're known for. So the point is, Barry Gordy had already written hit songs. He was the hit songwriter for Jackie Wilson, Lonely Teardrops, like some of them songs like that they had back then. He may have wrote 2-3 of Jackie Wilson's greatest hits. Jackie Wilson is the one where Michael Jackson got a lot of his charisma and movements from. He will say in interviews, when you watch them old interviews, he liked Jackie Wilson. He took stuff from James Brown. So if you know history, you see the movement and the transition. You see the evolution of these movements from one artist to another. That's one thing that nobody don't have over U.S. people in this so-called the USA in general, of the innovation and the amount of inventions they had. But it was the inventions and it was the so-called American Descendants of Slavery. It was those that was in that linear effort of work and contribution to building something. And that something that got built is something that they ain't really included on for certain different reasons. It wasn't time. But now it ain't time, not because of the so-called white man as much as it's because of so-called black folks themselves. They don't want to lose their position. You got ministers out here right today who they doing weird stuff behind the scenes. Ain't nobody saying nothing. And there've always been ministers doing wild stuff. But wouldn't we have evolved from that? You got openly ministers with girlfriends. So that's a violation of one of the 10 commandments right there. Thou shalt not commit. No. Is fornication a amendment, or is it just in the Bible? Fornication is a sin recognized by Christians, but it's not. I don't know if fornication is one of the 10 commandments. But the point is, that is a point. But the point is, you got ministers who got girlfriends. That's way offline. If you you're not getting taken serious like that. But they know they may be good for something else. Or he good at keeping them in check, but he do got a girlfriend right now. And or he do like to go and sneak off a little bit and do A, B, and C, and they might be a little young, so they still doing that. Because older ministers did stuff back in the past. It ain't like that, but the point is, of all the people who could be put in a position, they got certain people. The people who run stuff. They snap their finger, it's you. It's you. And with the last iteration, I guess the word I could say, is the point that they put a certain group on who they knew would hold everybody else back worse than what the Ku Klux Klan used to do. The so-called Negro who's in charge now on an administrative level is worse than the KKK. Like, because another group, if you know, like the origins of Atlanta and the South and how the South rose up. The South rose up in the last 25 years, or back then, from the legends that was there before the era right now. That was because of L.A. and Babyface, L.A. Reid and Babyface Edmonds. When they went down to Atlanta, obviously they had a singing group. They was musicians. They was in the group called The Deal. 2 occasions. They had so they had hits already. So when they were like recruiting groups like Outkast, Goody Mob, TLC, they were overseeing all these groups. They were masterful musicians. Now, I mean, not to say that an administrator can't make good moves and good music, but now it's a bunch of administrative dudes, or even if they did have some hits, the music changes. People, in order for a musician to exist for over the decade to decade to decade, they had to change their style. The style you hear them now may not have been the style they changed with. I mean, that they originated with, and then that style have to still be taken as authentic, and they keep their audience. They might get a new audience, but most of the time they got the same audience because they transcend styles. So the point is, the people who we see today at the highest levels as public figures, they're not even surpassing what comedians say. The highest level people with the highest information, the most profound information, is probably a comedian. It was Dave Chappelle who superseded what everyone was saying amongst the so-called LGBT community. They were telling him he had to be canceled. He did that one show, I think it was called The Closer, or if it wasn't that one, it was the one, a show before that, maybe 2023 or something, Netflix special. And Dave broke down the whole scenario. I mean, he put some politics in it to make it, but it was, digestible even to that group. The next special he did, he was more hardcore, and people said something, but there wasn't no more of that shutdown talk where you couldn't say nothing about LGBT. Like, oh, you can't be criticized, but you can criticize other people. That was the part of censorship that he shattered. Comedians they were shook, they were on lock, they couldn't say nothing. You was gonna be banned and called hate speech. So that's why Dave Chappelle broke that. When Charleston, it's other comedians that do some of that speaking and have spoken out, but the ones that's the super level comedian, he can't say nothing because he getting too much paper. So sometimes when you're getting too much paper, I get it, we get that, but don't act like you're still that top minister when you've been compromised because you've taken the positions of comfort and you're not going to speak for the street people no more. That was the whole thing in the 60s, people who was doing things well, and that's a whole conversation. See, that's why I say if we give up too much game, drop too much, we don't even get nothing. But this is the point. When you drop the highest level knowledge, you may look at somebody's viewership on whatever platform, or who you don't know who they are. The people who know what time it is are listening. They steal the idea and then they say it. I've heard that all the time. You can send a tweet to some of these people because at this point you can reach anybody. You send a tweet, you'll hear that same individual saying what you said in that tweet to them. They'll make that a part of what they say, but they don't say where they got it from. So none of us remember everything we strive to, but my point is that's how they're up there. Because once you reach a certain amount of level of prominence, everybody's sending you information. So-called black folk, they focus on those 3 factors. They talk about people and they put them down. That's the small level thinking. That's the small mindedness. Not to say we don't mention, because there have to be examples to a certain degree, but there's a certain amount of hatred, slave catcher mentality. Hey, massa, he running. Let me get him back down to here where we at. They keep him. You got Caucasians coming in inner city communities pointing out who told on people. See, you got Caucasians using the N-word in certain circles. You got Caucasians doing a lot of stuff. That ain't how it was. Y'all lost right there. Y'all drop the ball because you're not in his intimate conversation. You're using the N-word in front of Caucasian. You will never see that that's bad because you come from the generation where they stopped doing that, because that's the generation when people started getting money. They started buying off everybody, get what y'all want, and the women started saying, he ain't that bad because you buying them. You a top trick. You not no player. We all gonna spend, but still got to be disciplined and structure in any community. Once the structure was gone, because them dudes who wasn't supposed to get money erase crack, and the dudes who left over from that would be nobody. If you take crack from a lot of dudes' history, they'd be a nobody. You wouldn't have never got million another way. You wouldn't have never had money on that scale another way. It was a fool's move. Fools was having big cash. That's why it collapsed. Dudes was being rowdy, start arguing and fighting instead of shutting up and stacking the paper. They start beefing. Oh, I got that jacket. Who he think he is with that jacket? It got petty. And so, that's a whole nother thing. But those who ain't really official from those eras, not the time period, from that lineage of the street, these dudes ain't got 14, 15 people in their family that span 50, 60, 70, 100 years that was known to be thorough. Everybody say my family was this or my family was that. Yeah, but it's a different pedigree. Every German Shepherd ain't a canine. Every German Shepherd ain't registered with the American Kennel Association. You just got the one who your cousin Junebug and them said, we got this extra dog. You want it? Yeah. It looked just like a German Shepherd. It looked just like a pit bull. But that ain't the certified one that's linear, and you can trace that one to Germany where the breed came from, or whatever dog you talking about. That ain't the one you got from there. That's the one you got from here, and they mixed it up, and you don't even know the history. You don't know what the parents is, and that was the destructive nature of why Caucasians feel so guilty. Because all of the records of so-called black folk was destroyed on purpose for confusion and control. But we ain't saying it in a way. That's why they feel guilty. We ain't saying it in a way to put them down. We just saying to come through that, you do know where you came from. We do know our history, and we do know that you're here to get what you can get based upon what we built. So you can't even talk. Because I don't want to go to your third world country and rebuild. Your country will be controlled by Russia or China before you do anything. Because there's three factors in global politics. Why, brother, see, this is what I'm saying. It ain't even supposed to be me saying this. This is none of what you hear no leader say. I don't want to be no leader. I can go in a recording studio and make songs like Pac, meaning that many hits. Hey, see, there's one thing about Pac. This was different than these dudes today. Another thing about Tupac Amaru Shakur, as we said, my people even started an organization called empowermentforthepeople.org, empowermentforthepeople.com. They put a book out with it. Unlock the physical fitness expert within you, teaching physical fitness, health, how to elevate oneself, with very economically. Anyone can start right where they are and elevate with the motivation. And so they do provide a base level of education about it. But the point is, that's Pac making the song, Keep Your Head Up. Will the real men get up? I know you fed ups, ladies, so keep your head up. Just from that line right there, it's like, damn, Pac, you putting people on the spot, man. Damn, we got to, why everybody says sisters is this and they that, and they may or may not be. But what are you doing to elevate the group, the people, the nation? And this go from not just the inner city sisters and brothers there and the children there, but it can go, this is the long range. This go all the way to the Appalachian Mountains. You know what I mean? To the Rocky Mountains, anywhere. Everybody, this is what you do. People don't come here and rebuild like that. They do out of benefit because they are benefiting. We were never here for the benefit. We was here for building. See? And if we did benefit, it's just our home. See? So when it collapsed, some other people going back to Germany. So they be reckless and they be trying to talk. But the point is, none of the leaders that you see in the leading position, they ain't going to stand up and say what they need to say, but they going to call themselves a leader. You might as well be a comedian or an entertainer, because you ain't no leader. A leader go down with the ship. You ain't one of them. You just in a position of leadership, but you ain't. No, who wants to be a leader? That's why you hear a lot of these dudes, I ain't no leader. They smart enough to say that. I ain't no leader, because they know what the leader get. The leader get deleted. So they know that. So they want the position of the leader. They want you to follow them. They want you to buy from them. They want you to support them. But when my people said empowermentforthepeople.org, see, teach them how to do this. They go to the website. It's 3 steps to how they get started. Give them that for free. That's Pac. Pac gave that. Because Pac used to see people and say, hey, man, come to the studio, jump on this record. 60, 70, 80% of the people on a Tupac record wasn't that good at rapping. He put them as rappers. Man, y'all gonna be in this group. I'm gonna call y'all this. They wasn't that lyrical. They was making music so fast, they didn't sit around for 4 months writing no rhymes. Hey, man, write a verse for this. You was on a record. It's Pac. See? Pac did the same thing. I'm going to just put out certain ones was well thought and some didn't come out as good. But if he wanted to go listen to the Digital Underground Tupac and see ain't that lyrical. So go listen. And even now, if you say he wasn't lyrical, they going to jump on you because that same what Charleston White has, that same activism and community love, you could feel it through the lyric, Pac had it. But it wasn't just that. Look at all the stories of people who said, Pac told us, come out here and record. Come out here and jump on this record. One time, Pac was talking to a dude in Cali. Rest in peace to him. He passed away now. But he was known in the street, wrote a book, author, well-respected in the underworld. Pac kept on it's an interview floating around. Pac is on the phone like, hey, when you coming through the studio to get on this record? He pressing him. When you coming through? Jump on this record. Just helping. The point I'm making is these dudes now, they don't be free with that. They act just like executive corporate people. Well, in order to come, you can buy a block amount of time for $300 a week. Or if we do put the money up and help you, you will have to give this up. And I'm not saying Pac didn't take rights and publishing from producers and stuff to put him on. And he did a few things that they encouraged him to do. But it's a lot of instances where he just gave dudes a shot that wouldn't have got that shot. So that's dead. All the dudes that are celebrated are dudes who ain't really helped nobody. Yeah, you help your man right there and 3 people. But Barry Gordy put on many people. And it was monetary issues with Barry Gordy, too. And there was arguments about finances and lawsuits in his day. So no one's perfect. But my point is he had a mechanism of success, just like they did down there in Atlanta. They was putting out groups, many groups. Barry Gordy had many groups. They had a machine. These dudes ain't even got that ability. That's why I said we could walk in the spot and have 20 people on. They'll never let us in the place if it ain't our paper. Nah, keep him away. That was the haters. They put the haters in control and they crippled the streets as well. They keep blaming the Caucasian. Oh, white man, these Caucasians. No, you be blocking. You don't make it where nobody else can get ahead because they lock their positions in. They got to ride that out for that 20 years. 30 years of being selfish. See, that's why I said that book we just read, that my people in them is only getting $3 as an ebook on Amazon for that. Unlock the physical fitness expert within you. They getting $3. You can charge $10. You can go up from $2.99 to like $9.99. They charging $3, and the same information, the beginning of it, just the basic part, without explaining it, that's on the website. So it's like you don't even got to talk to them. You don't got to know who they are. Go to get the information and keep moving. That's the spirit of activism. Because sometimes we ain't got the paper to do the things we would do. Just imagine if we had some paper. We change everything. The whole country be eating. And the hater who been put in position based upon the travesties and the tragedies that occurred in the 60s and 70s, they put them safe dudes in place who was kind of scary because they didn't want to. If you write with the dudes getting taken out and they knew the backup and they just remained safe. But this ain't a safe era when people not having things going. These ain't brilliant minds of people. They just in position and they haters and they blaming these Caucasians, but it ain't like they coming out and saying this is what you do. Charleston White did that. This is a comedian. How the comedian dropping science on how to elevate? How the comedian pointing out the political structure and how policy should be approached? Caucasians hear him talking. So they're like, oh, she's sharp. And they laughing at everybody else like, those other Negroes don't really understand what he's saying. He told them, and they're hoping that they don't catch on. And then after a while, they'll say, oh, they missed that. And they say, well, Charleston, you come over here with us. And then next thing you know, he popping on a whole nother level. He already said it. These dudes arguing and blaming politicians for what the situation is. It's bigger than that. All leaders are together, but all leaders are not together. All superpowers, or what makes one a superpower, is the ability for for global destruction. They can blow up the whole. There's enough of an arsenal of military capability to destroy whole countries. The U.S. destroyed Japan with their nuclear bombs. With Hiroshima and for Japan, Nagasaki, as if I'm pronouncing it right. They dropped 2 or 3 atomic bombs, and that was a wrap. And at that time, nobody else had a nuclear atomic capabilities. At that time, China didn't have it, and Russia didn't have it. And then the U.S. just voted for peace. But these people now are rallying against the U.S. That's why Charleston White said, the black people ain't your problem. What he was meaning is, me talking about Charlie Kirk ain't your problem. That's what he was saying. But your problem is Russia. Your problem is China, because they're grouping together and they're forming axis alliances together against you. They're still smaller, but they challenging. While the brother just in the background, they looking at the so-called black race as like a child. So the so-called people who with a voice, these brothers you see speaking today, they're not a level of Frederick Douglass or a level of even Booker T. Washington. And they liked him because he promoted learning a skill or a trade. And back then, the sentiment was that a so-called black man didn't have the brain capacity to study like the sciences or mathematics or be intellectual. So they liked him teaching trades, but the trade was a good thing. So they, that's why he had his Tuskegee Institute, which still exists today. What school these dudes got? I ain't talking about no high school. I ain't talking about no elementary school. A university, and they was producing and making stuff happen. That, when you go to George Washington Carver, that's a whole nother show. But my point is, we got more advanced discoveries. Like, other people will take our art, switch the language to something else, like Spanish or something else, and now they claim it and give it a different name. Man, that's rap. That ain't no reggae. Reggaeton is rap. And it ain't even new from the Bronx. They was rapping down south and all over the U.S. It was a different rap. How you gonna say they was rapping in Africa, where in Africa they weren't even rapping the way they rap here when they started rapping? So it was different. The rhythms is different. It became something different when the people proved to be something different. Here, it was always different, but that's a whole, it's layers of history. Dudes don't read books. They don't study, and nobody never knows everything. But if you get up on that podium, these cats, man, Malcolm X used to say, I was wrong about that all the time. I was wrong about that. I kind of learned that. He was learning as he go. You can't always learn as you go at them high levels, because you making a mistake right now that you don't even know you making. And that's what it was. And they give you a warning. Hey, man, I wouldn't say that if I was you. You get warned. And them dudes is, what? And they don't see it. It'd be a warning. It'd be a car in front of people's house. And you don't see it no more in the street level of life. It'd be warning signs like, you can't do it like that. So it's very few people with so astute, so evolved, so intellectual and intelligent, they know how to navigate and succeed. We got examples, but as I said, when we drop that knowledge and you drop them jewels and you give up that long range game, them dudes who you think ain't listening is listening, and then they ease it into their situation, into their presentation. They take what you got. That's what's been happening for the last 60 years. That's why they call them player haters, because they hate the real ones. So it became a hater, and they reversed it. So when you give a critical analysis of something, you're a hater. No, this is based upon research, man. This is unbiased information. Not me per se. I'm saying that's what can be presented. That's why certain people blew up. What did they say? What they were doing. They were using research, data, and statistics. That stopped everything. That stopped everything with Kevin Samuels when he said research, data, and statistics. So ever since then, there ain't no need to keep having that conversation about what people are doing wrong. We can see the results of what's happening on all fronts. So it's real out here. So anyway, this is the Online Time Fame podcast. We just want to, swoop in real quick, have a small, brief presentation for y'all, and we appreciate the listeners. But as I said, we just got to put something in the street for the people, to get, because it is what they call podcasting out here. So we want to do that and add on. As we said, we also have to pay homage and respect for what Charleston White did when he did it, because he came on the scene of the so-called social media world, and he opened the door, and then he made education cool. So anyway, let us say peace.